Good evening, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Monday night panel stroke on the sofa. It's good to be back with you after a bit of a break. Hope you all enjoyed your weekend with and found things to do with a non-football Saturday. Just a couple of things. Want to say good luck to Lewis Ward, who has today signed for Charlton. And also, I will get on my high horse again, I'm sorry. But there's been lots and lots of things in socials, and I know people have been had things said to them that are not kind about football, not necessarily on socials. So can we just remember that everybody has an opinion on the things that are going on the field, off the field, whatever. But please be kind to people. Next week, everybody has the opportunity to ask questions at the Fans Forum, which we are holding 7:00 in the Legends Lounge. It is fully booked, but we are having a reserve list. So please, people who want to ask questions, please come along to that or send your questions in and we will ask them. Questions are not going to be vetted. I know this is a rumour that's been going around. They won't be vetted. The only reason that we're asking them to be actually sent in is so we can categorise. We can put them into different topics, so we're not duplicating questions, and we'll have more time for other questions that may come from the audience after the specific topics have been covered. A lot of it was covered last week in Clem's interviews with the club and with various media outlets. But if you still have questions, please do send them in. There is a Google Forms on the invite that we sent out. But if you want to send an email to us, that's admin@stfc-osc.com. We will make sure that the questions are put into the topics that they cover, or if they're a question on their own. So please, let's try and all be together. We all love the club. We are all doing things for the right of the club. We want it to be the best it is. We love it. And everything like that. So please be kind. Other things to say, and I've now forgotten, seeing as I went on my high horse. So I will get Vic on, and I'm sure I will remember. Hiya, Vic. And I'm losing my voice as well. So
yeah, okay. Yeah, good. Well done to the youths, of course, for their victory at Newport on Saturday, and also to Swindon Town women, who had a fabulous Wiltshire Cup victory over Wootton Bassett yesterday. Yes, well done to both of those teams. SAS Travel. Now, there is limited availability for the forthcoming trips to Newport and Gillingham. And those spaces are available, limited availability, by phone tomorrow from 7:00. So if you want to get in touch with SAS Travel, then that's the time to do it. 7:00 tomorrow night by phone. Limited availability for Newport and for Gillingham. The game at Newport, of course, is a 12:45 kickoff. So remember that, a couple of Saturdays' time, 12:45 kickoff at Newport. I believe that's because there is a Six Nations clash at Cardiff taking place. So that's the reason. And I'd just like to agree with Chris, really. There's no reason to abuse people on the phone. Just don't do it. What's the point? It might make you feel better, but just remember that person has to the rest of their day. So don't do it. It's that simple.
The other one that we've just heard, actually, it is Swindon related to a point. Lawrence Figueroa has been he's on loan at Dundalk over in Ireland till the end of the season. So that's a bit of a shock. So he's on loan from Burnley over to Dundalk. Thanks, Declan, if you're listening, for putting that bit of news out for us. Okay, so tonight we have got Ray and we have got Rob, who are going to talk playoffs. So let's, any questions or any comments, please put them in. We'll get as many as we can through, and I will see you later.
Thanks, Chris. Go and have a gargle and feel better in a minute. I've had that myself, so it's not very pleasant. So well done for getting through it, Chris. And Daz St. George says, well done to Chris for saying what she said earlier, which I think we would all agree with, frankly. Right, we're going to talk playoffs today. Ray, you're very much involved with the Swindon Town Museum with the playoff project. We'll find out a little bit about that in a minute. And Rob, you're with us because you're old enough to have seen all the playoffs like me. So
every minute of them.
Yeah. So we thought we'd go through them and talk about the playoffs from its inception in 1986 all the way through to where we are at the minute. Ray, the museum project. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing.
Yeah, thanks, Vic. Yeah. I've got involved as a result, really, of kind of. I was thinking about the museum as it became sort of like a topic online, really. Before the kickoff, there was a bit of promotion that it was coming, and it was something that kind of interested me. And I had, my lifestyle had changed in terms of not working full time, and I had, some time I believed I could offer. And it was just something, that was bubbling around in my mind. And, it's something I felt I could really sort of contribute to and offer an opinion and maybe help the trustees of the museum out. Because I know that, the trustees have volunteered to actually take the museum idea forward, which is a brilliant thing in itself. But it's a lot of work in people's busy lives. And I thought, maybe I've got the chance to help out a little bit and get involved in it.
Yeah, the playoffs, Rob. I've been writing down lots of details this afternoon. I've spent a great deal of time doing it. 9 playoff campaigns, 3 of which have been successful. It's a strike rate of 33%. We haven't had a successful one since 1993. Long time ago, isn't it?
I was just about to say, if you're over 30, you'll remember, you've got a chance of having seen Swindon win a playoff tournament. But if you're under 30, you probably haven't. So this might be a bit of reminiscing for some of us older guys, but for some of the younger ones, they'll not have a clue what it's like to win a playoff.
They won't know what we're talking about, will they? They've got no idea, really. So let's go back to the very beginning, because 86, 87 was right back at the start of the playoff campaign. I'm just going to read you one tweet that I got in a little bit earlier. This is from Oakus Road. He says, Charlton away, had everything. Keeper injured in first minutes, own goal, then 2-0 down. The most weird goal to make it 2-1. Greer sent off, worst penalty shootout. Stephen Darby, of course, scoring the winning penalty. Drove from North, a word beginning with O, to Swanage to pick up my son, and then to Charlton. What a night. You see, we'd love some more memories like that, please. So please get in touch and remind us of your playoff memories so that we can relay them. But let's go back to 86, 87. Ray, the first year that the playoffs were introduced, I will plug this cassette one more time, which I've been listening to this afternoon, which features many of the highlights of that campaign. An extraordinary campaign in many ways, because Swindon had won the league, the 4th Division title the year before, 102 points, 85-86, playoffs the following year, new idea, and there was a relegation playoff in it as well, wasn't there?
Yeah. The first format of it included a team from the division above. In our case, that time around, it was Sunderland, and they ended up in a semi-final with our eventual final opponents, Gillingham, and Gillingham knocked them out, obviously, and we went on to face them. But that the first year that format existed. By the time we appeared again in the next playoffs, it had moved on, and it was only teams from the same league.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sunderland, of course, how did they feature in our lives a little later? I think it's fair to say. Yeah. Rob, what do you remember of those playoffs? Because it was Wigan, wasn't it, in the semi-finals? And there was that magical night up at the old Springfield Park when the town really didn't look as though they were going to do very well, but they came back in a really memorable way.
Yeah, it's a horrible night up in Lancashire. I can remember that. And we had a nice little bank as well. Again, a lot of people that follow football now will never believe some of the places you used to stand to watch football matches at that level, but that was what we did. We had a bank behind us, and Town were dreadful in the first half, weren't they? Absolutely dreadful in the first half of the play. It was almost as if the pressure of the situation had got to them. 2-0 down, really struggling. Looked like Wigan could go on and score a hatful, to be quite honest. But that was probably the most magical Macari team talk to turn a game around that we actually saw, because the second half was just complete domination from Swindon from start to finish. And the moment that they scored the goal to get back to 2-1, everybody was totally behind them. There was no doubt whatsoever that Swindon were going to go on and win that game. And memorable Dave Bamber moments, as there often were in that season. And Town found themselves with a 3-2 victory away from home, which gave them all the impetus they needed for the home game.
Rob mentioned the bank, Ray. What I seem to remember from that part, well, two things I remember. Commentating in the old Springfield Park ground, it had a glass side to the main stand. So there was this kind of mirror. You saw one half of the ground and then reflected in this great glass side to it. So you kind of saw one half twice, if you see what I mean. It was a bit difficult. But I remember Celery. Celery came to the fore that night.
Yeah, it did. And I remember that stand as well, Vic. I was sat in that, looking at the grass bank that Rob just mentioned, which I found quite unbelievable at the time. And that stand was brilliant that night. It was the contrast in emotion. It was only a small stand and it was mostly Wigan. But the contrast in emotions in that stand as the game progressed was unbelievable because, of course, they were all rocking with the, they were 2 up in 15 minutes and 1 on top. But as the half wore on, as you say, we started to sort of grow a little bit. And then second half, it really turned. And the difference in that stand from one half to the next is the biggest contrast I can't think I've experienced really in a ground. It was fantastic.
Yeah, memories are coming in already, and that's great. Thank you. Anthony says 92-93 under Hoddle, my favourite. I was at Prenton Park the second leg. We will get on to that. Pete Lango, hi Pete. I went to that game. I'm not sure which one he means. Is it the Wigan game? It might well have been because, of course, Pete was in the youth squad at that time. Derek Elson, hi Derek. Playoffs, the Football League's way of making more money. I remember our first ones that finished at Selhurst Park. We had that after coming off in the home against Gillingham, you only had to look at the Gillingham team trudging off the county ground after we tied things up. Personally, still don't like the playoffs. I know we got that Leicester game, but my memory was the Wigan and Gillingham playoffs. 86-87 says Lee, against Wigan. I remember getting on the pitch and joining in the mass conga in the centre circle. My dad was looking for me. I danced straight past him. I mean, that night was great, and it was a fabulous game. And to come back and do what they did, but the actual second leg was a bit of an anticlimax, Rob, wasn't it?
And none of us complained at all, did we? Let's be quite honest, because the entertainment we'd seen in the second half at Springfield Park was more than enough for that tie, and Swindon just needed to be and just do a professional job in that second leg. Exactly what they did. It was ugly and horrible and miserable. There were barely any chances to speak of for either team, from what I recall. It really was a bit of a drudgery, but who cared? It was watching that night because it was all a case of you've got your lead, protect it, make sure you get yourself to the 2-legged semi-final, which of course that's what it was in those days.
Yes.
2-legged final. Sorry, it wasn't a trip to a day out to Wembley like everyone experiences these days, or a day out to Cardiff like it was a few years ago. It was a 2-legged semi-final, home and away. So it was just a case of do your job, get yourself through, do everything professionally, and hopefully that will be enough. And it was more than enough on the day.
Yeah, 0-0. My memory of that day, of course, I did the commentary with the late great Alan McLaughlin, which was a treat because he'd been away from the club. He'd been out on loan, I think, that season and come back. But it was a great treat to do it with him. Worst one for me was Millwall 2010. Not only did we lose, but my company gave me complimentary tickets in the Millwall end. Ouch. Wirral on the 19th of May 1993. We will get to these chronologically. Now to the final itself, Ray, and that was on a cold Friday night in Kent, I seem to remember, and a narrow victory for the home team.
Yeah, I was there for that one, Vic. Yeah, I remember that as well. It was, and of course there was the niggle, still is, but there was the niggle between the two sides. So it felt like a big game because the two clubs really didn't like each other. And yeah, we took obviously the amount. I think it's about 3,000 of us went down there. That was the maximum that we could get in there. That was very much a salary night as well as you mentioned for Wigan. I remember the horses eating them outside as they confiscated them. But yeah, and I think it was a game again where we probably should have come away with something, probably a win, to be honest. And we were never in big trouble, but Gillingham, from my memory, Gillingham scored sort of towards the end as a result of a free kick, and unfortunately we did trail on going into the second leg.
Yeah, Dave Smith it was who got the late goal for Gillingham that night. Yeah, Pete Lango went to the Wigan game, as I suspected. Yeah, that was a pretty narrow defeat, but of course the second leg, Rob, was bonkers, wasn't it? I mean, you think of comebacks. Boy, that was a comeback.
It was, and obviously it will always be remembered for that Charlie Henry, I'll call it winner on the night, but obviously equaliser on the tie, about 8-9 minutes from time. But everyone seems to forget how brilliant the Carl Elsey goal was for Gillingham, because obviously it was a real kick in the teeth for us, especially at the time it was in the game. Suddenly Town having looked in reasonable control of the game, to be fair, found themselves 2 goals adrift. So it was going to be a real tough ask to find themselves a way back into that tie. And still with 20 minutes remaining, you couldn't really see a way that Swindon were going to find themselves through that game. But one little piece of magic, and then obviously that Charlie Henry winner, which everyone will remember. And I don't think, Ray mentioned it a few minutes ago, when you saw Gillingham trudge off the pitch, you knew there was only ever going to be one winner in that third tie. And of course, that's what it was in those days. Again, for those people who only remember playoffs of the last 20 years, they'll never know that there was a replay if you drew the 2-legged semi-final and you had a third game, and that's what we had.
Yeah, of course, no away goals in the playoffs, which is a big factor, really, in a way. I mean, it's a bit like, I always remember Peter Coyne getting the goal for the Town, the other goal. It's a bit like Dave Sirott getting the other goal against Everton rather than Kenny Stroud's, blockbuster from way out. So, it's the kind of forgotten goal, but a crucial one, Ray. I mean, that really did get Swindon back in the tie, didn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And they did have the crowd on side, the county ground was really behind them, and that just really ratcheted it up when that went in. And and it gave us the basis for Charlie Henry, obviously, to finish the job on the night. Actually, the away goals did count in the semi. So with the Wigan game, they actually counted, but they didn't count, thankfully, in the final, because if they had done, we would have gone out.
Yeah, bizarre, strange. Yeah. Glenn says, wasn't Dave Bamber related to Colin Greenall, who played for Gillingham? Wasn't he brother-in-law or something? Am I
soon to be brother-in-law?
Yes, I thought he was. Yeah. Lee says, one of my favourite wins was the penalty shootout at Charlton. The coach journey back was buzzing. One of my favourite memories. So let's go to a balmy night at Selhurst Park then. If you could eventually find your way there. It's a bit of a nightmare at Selhurst Park, isn't it? Friday night in London. Oh, brilliant. What are your memories of that, Ray?
Brilliant night. One of my strange, I'll be honest, one of my strangest memories is I found my favourite set of urinals ever in a football ground that evening, because that traffic you mentioned, we've been stuck in London for so long. I was absolutely desperate, and it was the most relieved I've ever been to find a set of urinals. But so they're my favourite Football League urinals. But
I wonder where you were going with that from.
Yeah, but having got that out of the way, it was a brilliant night. I remember, obviously, we scored early in that one. Steve White scored early. And I certainly, Rob mentioned the confidence at the end of the previous game that he felt we had it. After 2 minutes, I knew we were going to win that. And thankfully, so it proved. But it's great and the noise from the Swindon supporters, because we had to sort of, we took 10,000 up there. And actually, when I was looking at the playoff project, it was a bit incredible what happened, because it was originally going to be basically not all ticket. And bearing in mind, the turnaround between the second leg of the final and the replay was only a few days.
Yeah.
They changed their mind after a day or so and made it all tickets. So everybody had to scramble for tickets, but we still sold 10,000 of them. And the noise was incredible up there. It was just singing all the way through. It's one of the best atmospheres, I think, that I've seen the fans produce.
Yeah, it's fabulous. I mean, Chalky getting that early goal, Rob, that kind of settled everything down, didn't it? And he was on fire that night, and you just knew, didn't you? They were going to lose that one.
Well, I was in turmoil, Vic, at that time, only because it didn't look like we were going to make it at all. No. Literally, I came through the turnstiles as the whistle went for the start of the game. So it was really touch and go as to whether we were going to make the start of the match. And literally, I was coming down the steps as I saw the ball come over the top for Chalky to run down on goal. And the noise, as Ray said, when that ball hit the net from Chalky's boot in the opening minutes was just deafening. It's the sort of noise that you will always remember, because you just had to be part of it. And it was almost as if the Gillingham fans, after what had happened at Swindon, realised there and then, their game was up at that point in time. You're only a couple of minutes into a one-off game, effectively. Why on earth would you give up? But it just felt like they did. It just felt like they were going through the motions for the rest of the game. And there was just one team celebrating all the way through. And obviously when you get to a point where you start to feel more comfortable in the game in the second half, and you know that there's no way back for Gillingham, it was just party time with about 20 minutes left for the Swindon fans. And the scenes on the pitch afterwards were just incredible. You obviously were there. You were on the pitch that night, and it's probably one of those endearing memories that you'll never lose.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I did make the famous comment, why don't you go over there and interview that chap there? I'm sure he'll be very happy to talk to you. And his first word was a swear word. So I never, ever assume, I think it's fair to say. Yeah, it was a great night and a fabulous victory for the town, of course. And the renowned fitness, I think, played a part because, don't forget, this has been a long, hard, grueling season, hadn't it? We've got players like Steve Berry, I seem to remember, coming in late on in the scene. You know, there were a lot of players, Ray, weren't there, that had sort of moved on from the previous season. We brought other players in, but they fitted into that fitness regime that Lou had going.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned, you know, when you think back, they were 2-0 behind twice in both games. Actually, they were 2-0 behind, and that fitness and spirit dragged them through. And yeah, absolutely. That there was a set of players that gave everything really, and I think they believed that. I know I've listened, you know, when Dave Bamber's been on, and they believed they were going to win. Yeah. And that was a big part of it, I think. So that they were a great set of players, and yeah, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't in much doubt that evening. You could see they were going to do it.
Yeah, fabulous night, despite the traffic. 5-5 against Sheffield United, says Mark. Yeah, well, we'll get to that later because it remains the most bonkers game of football I think I've ever seen. It was awful getting to Selhurst Park, says Rich. It certainly was. So, right, let's have a look. Now, Selhurst Park plays a part in the next playoff campaign, I think, Ray, doesn't it? 1988-89, after winning just 4 of their first 16 games, they lose only 2 of the last 19 to grab a playoff place against Crystal Palace. Now, was it to be another promotion, another great playoff campaign, Ray?
That's what the hope was, Vic. But it was our turn to taste the other side of it, really. But we went in against Palace. I mean, the odds weren't great for us, really, because I was looking at in researching it. We prior to that season, and actually only in the April just before, at the end of the season, we managed to 1-0 against Palace. That was the first win in 25 years. So we didn't have a good record against Palace, and so going in, you know, it was never going to be easy. And they had a fairly lethal strike force as well in those days. Ian Wright, who everybody will still recognise from now, and his partner Mark Bright, they really were a strong pairing up front. So that again was not going to make our life easy. And first leg, actually, I thought they did pretty well. I thought we were on top. Could have been more than 1-0 up going into the second.
Had a goal disallowed, if I remember, as well.
Yeah, one that Macari wasn't too chuffed with, looking at his reaction to it. But yeah, and there were other chances where we could have been more than 1 up. But going at, you know, we had the 1 goal to take up to Selhurst Park, as you say, and hope, you know, that unfortunately I don't think that kind of proved enough.
No, if I remember, Rob, it wasn't just Wright and Bright who were lethal. Of course, they got the decisive goals in the second leg, but they had players like John Solarco, who was a bit tasty too, wasn't he?
Oh, they were a top quality side, weren't they?
Yeah.
And they went on further on. A lot of those players, to grace the top flight of the country for many a year. They were goal scorers aplenty. They were a really strong physical side, Palace, as well, which. When you talk about the famed fitness regime that Swindon had in those days, was quite a contrast, really, because you've got a really strong physical side against a really well-drilled, well-oiled machine that got themselves through games, fitness after fitness, time after time. And like Ray said, I don't think, unlike the other campaigns, there wasn't the same sense of expectation, I think, from our fans. I think there was always... This could be a step too far. This one, this is going into a level that none of us can really believe we've got to. And this, we'd sort of sneaked into the playoffs that season, haven't we? We got ourselves. We'd come up on the rails towards the back end of the season when we weren't really in a position, any great stage where you thought we would make it. And we eventually managed to find ourselves in there and taking a lead to Selhurst Park. That just gave everybody that little bit more optimism, I think. But they were brilliant in the first half, Palace, at Selhurst Park. I have to say they were really dominant that day. Their fans are famed, obviously, now for the support that they get, and they really did get behind the team. It was quite ironic that we would be in the same venue as one of our most famous days to have one of our most dismal days.
Yeah, I just remember Salaka getting the ball in his own half, driving through midfield and then smacking the ball an inch over the top of the crossbar. And you thought, this ain't going to be our night somehow. I would always take promotion via playoffs versus automatic. Extra games to prolong the season and to win at our national stadium is special. The national stadium. We'll discuss that later. It ended a brilliant night. I got to bed at 2 a.m. That's going back to the previous Selhurst Park. And Derek says, the worst place in the world to end your season when beaten. Yeah, and it's a horrible journey away. I mean, if you come from South London, I do apologise, but it's not nice, is it? Let's be honest. So, should we go to 1989-90? Now, this is a season rocked by scandal, you'll both remember. They reached the playoffs again. Blackburn Rovers in the semi-final, and that leads to the final. What are your memories of Blackburn Rovers then, Ray? A great first leg and a second leg. What were your memories of it?
Yeah, that was one where I did go to the home leg. That was one of the ones I missed, was the away leg, but obviously I was following it on the radio in those days, really. And it was a significant win because they were no mugs, Blackburn. And, we've been playing brilliant football all season. It was obviously when, our dealers had taken over from Macari. We still had a really fit, willing, strong side, but they were now playing a lot of football as well. And we actually played brilliantly through that season. And it wasn't a surprise that we won up there, but it was by no means, an easy task. So it was great to have that 2-1 going into the second leg.
Yeah, Stigafolia, I remember, Rob. What a great goal from him in that first leg.
Absolute belter, wasn't it? And that was a slightly different atmosphere again, as we talk about the feelings of the fans. The Palace situation, it was almost like it was great to be there because none of us really expected it. But that season, the ability that they'd shown under Ardiles was in absolute stark contrast to the way that Macari had played them. Even though a lot of the players were the same, they actually could demonstrate their abilities. And I think that gave everybody a lot more confidence that actually we're a better side than Blackburn. Good players, don't get me wrong. Howard Gales of this year, this era, there was some Simon Garners, there were some very, very good players in that Blackburn squad. But you just felt that we just had the edge. And it was more a case of, can we get to a position where we can stamp our authority on the tie? And being away first, that's always difficult. And that was the most crucial result. That Stigafolia goal, as you say, just gave everybody the belief. And we put in a real strong performance up in Blackburn. And that ultimately proved enough to get us through to Wembley.
The home leg, of course, a similar scoreline, Ray, 2-1, so 4-2 on aggregate.
Yeah, I again, going in, trying to think about how I was feeling at the time. I think once you get the league coming back to the county ground, the football we were seeing in those days, I think it was a scenario where you were fairly confident we would be able to do it. And as it turned out, we did. And so it made for another, and it was a packed house as well again. And it made for, it set us up really nicely for what was to come, really.
I always remember, though, I think it was Bill Fox, who was president of the Football League and indeed president of Blackburn at that time. And he was asked a question afterwards, who would win the final? And he said Sunderland. He said, what happens if they don't win? Sunderland will go up. So whether they knew what was coming, who knows? But let's go to the final. And Rob, the most one-sided 1-0 victory you'll ever see, ever in the history of the world, I think it's fair to say. Alan McLaughlin, or was it Bennett, who the age-old sort of discussion, but we'll get to the great Alan McLaughlin, obviously. A 1-0 victory, promotion, sadly it wasn't.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many memories of that day, Vic. It was my first trip to Wembley. I'd refused to go to Wembley to watch any England games or anything like that. I wanted to watch my team at Wembley. That was my first visit that I can recall. And obviously, the sense of seeing over 40,000 of your fellow Swindon fans in one end, packed in the old Wembley as it was then, which again, a lot of people may not remember, but your Twin Towers, all your special we were there so early. I think we were there about 3 or 4 hours before kickoff. You soaked it all in. And I don't think any of us really were that concerned about what was going on off the pitch that day. It was all about what was going to go on the pitch. And could we actually achieve something this club had never achieved before? And like you say, Vic, I'd love to know what was said in the changing rooms at the start and at the end of that game. because I don't think I've ever seen a game where one team is so overawed by the occasion and the other team dominates the game so much, but they just can't put them away. Because Lord knows how many we should have had that day at Wembley. We could easily have, it could have been double figures. Very, very easy. The Eric Gates of this world at Sunderland were ripping the division apart. Marco Gabbiadini scoring goals for fun.
Yeah.
And they put out Newcastle in the semi-final. And everyone expected us to be playing Newcastle because they were supposedly the best team in the playoffs that year. So no one really expected Sunderland to make it, but everyone expected them to beat little old Swindon. But no, that performance that day was just exceptional. The McLaughlin shot, of course it was going in the far corner. Dave Bennett was just an evil bystander in the middle, just to take a little bit of gloss away from him.
I once interviewed Dave Bennett, he was down in Plymouth doing a soccer school, and I said to him, did you score it? Oh, I say football school. What did I say soccer school for? And I said, did you score it? Did Alan McLaughlin score it? Alan McLaughlin scored it. So he didn't want anything to do with it, quite frankly. Anthony says, my memory of Ewood Park win was a burger in the face after Foley scored. Agree with Rob, we dominated up there. And Lee says, Blackburn home in 90 stood in the town end. My dad clipped me round the head for swearing as I turned round. I realised it was with a lump of celery. So there we are. I always remember there was a police quote which said, a lump of celery is not a dangerous weapon as long as it's limp. It kind of always stuck with me, that quote. I'm not really sure what they meant by that, but there we are. That team against Sunderland would have done well in League One. And I think that's the age-old question, Ray, isn't it? Where would we be today if that promotion had stood?
Yeah, I agree as well, because they had a real togetherness. I think they certainly would have stood a better chance than the team, good as they were in the promotion season. The team that we went into the Premiership with, that other side would have beaten them 9 times out of 10. I think that they were a real collective after that performance against Sunderland. So it was a crying shame really that it didn't happen. I know I went into the game. I was thinking that the fact that we were there and they allowed us to go to Wembley must mean that things are okay. So I don't remember thinking too much about that during the game. I kind of thought that the fact we were there, we didn't need to worry too much, but a bit wrong on that one.
10 days later, we knew we were. Craig says, I'm still picking the ticker tape out of my hair from that day at Wembley. Because that was another memory, wasn't it? Ozzy Ardiles, of course, the Argentina World Cup, 1978, the ticker tape, all that kind of thing. Fabulous. The events of 10 days later we know about. We needn't dwell too much on, but a very sad day in the history of Swindon Town Football Club. Right, let's move on then to 1992-93. Ozzy Ardiles has gone off to Newcastle, and somebody called Glenn Hoddle has taken over at Swindon. So we had Lou Macari, Ozzy Ardiles, and Glenn Hoddle in quick succession. Hey, your reaction, Ray, when you heard Glenn Hoddle was to be the manager of Swindon?
Yeah, unbelievable, really. I mean, to think it kind of become the norm, isn't it? When you look at his 2 predecessors, maybe that took a little bit of the shock away. But I mean, I'd always really liked Hoddle. He was such a classy player, so I was delighted when it kind of felt like one of the few that could have taken it on from Ardiles, really. Particularly as Colin, we probably evolved with the style of football. Macari was brilliant for us. Ozzy added some gloss to it. And there was a good hope with Glenn coming in that we would continue in that kind of vein of the really great to watch football as well. So I was really, I was a little bit gobsmacked, but I think it was a really good appointment on the back of losing Ozzy, really.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn, I was still gobsmacked that we had a World Cup winner as our manager. That was like, what? I'd watched him on a grainy black and white TV back in '78 dominate the midfield for Argentina. He was a fabulous player, was Ozzy. And then, of course, we have Glenn Hoddle, who did take the football to a new level, Rob, didn't he?
Unbelievable, Vic. It really was. If you think back to those days now and you try and equate it, it's very difficult to do that. I mean, you think of a club of our size attracting a World Cup winner. And let's be honest, when Ozzy Ardiles was there, we had Néstor Lorenzo playing for us as well.
We did. Yes.
We had actual Argentinian internationals in our squad. And it was just unbelievable technical football, that like of which we'd not seen before. And as we just said, it was you would struggle naturally to think of a successor that could then build on that. But Glenn Hoddle just was your classic knock your socks off moment, wasn't it? When suddenly you hear him get appointed at Swindon, and from day one it became a crusade for him, didn't it? More than anything else, it felt that way, as if he was there to right the wrongs that have been done to all of us, and take us back to the place that we belonged. And obviously, we had a really tough season. The season after we should have gone up, we only just managed to escape on the very last day. And strangely enough, against a team we'll talk about in a few moments, I think, because that 5-0 thrashing at home second last day, wasn't it, of Leicester, gave us the security of another place in that league again. And then all of a sudden, from then onwards, Glenn just built a team that was going to be playing the type of football and scoring the number of goals that we scored that following season that got us into the playoffs. And the football was just on a different level to anything we'd experienced before.
Yeah, Glenn Hoddle could hit he could play pure Route 1 football, couldn't he? He just happened to play a 65-yard pass into the path of somebody. It was beautiful Route 1 football. Derek says the league thought that we would never win, so it wouldn't be a problem, that against Sunderland. Stephen, hi, Stephen. People seem to forget Sunderland were the better side in the first 10 minutes. After that, it was one-way traffic. It certainly was. 2 matches against Tranmere Rovers then. Brilliant start in the home leg, Ray. Fabulous start, wasn't it? And Tranmere had 1 or 2 players who we always they were like always thorns in our side, weren't they? Pat Nevin was playing with them, for goodness sake.
Yeah, he was. And was it the likes of Aldridge as well at the time? Yeah. And it was a brilliant start. We knew they'd be dangerous. And I think they also, if you remember not long before that, where they were 2-0 up at the county ground and the floodlights failed. And I don't think they'd ever forgotten that either. And yes, we went into that one. So that was always in their minds. But yeah, brilliant start. And again, fantastic atmosphere. Certainly the best atmospheres that I've experienced have all been around the playoffs, I think. In that was a brilliant atmosphere at the county ground as well. And it set us up. Of course, we went on to get a third as well. Unfortunately, we did concede 1, which made sure that the second leg was going to be a bit interesting. But it was a great night. Again, playing the sort of football. We were still playing good football, even in those pressure games. And it was a great night. Yeah,
and then, of course, up to the Wirral for the second leg, Rob. Tranmere, of course, we should have played on Saturday. It would have tied in nicely with talking about the playoffs, wouldn't it? But the Wirral on the second leg, Wembley is confirmed. What are your memories of that?
That was probably as nervous as I've been at a football match for a long, long, long time. I have to say, possibly ever, to be honest, because it almost felt like, going back to what we were talking about a few moments ago, our destiny was to get ourselves promoted that season under Glenn Hoddle. And we'd done 95% of the job by being 3 up at the county ground. And giving away that goal towards the very end of that game just put every possible seed of doubt in your mind that you could wish for. And even though you're going up to the Wirral with a 2-goal lead, with the likes of Nevin, the likes of Aldridge, this could be wiped out very, very easily by the home side. And they did, didn't they? They didn't half play in that first half. I don't think we saw the ball in the first half. It never felt, certainly never felt like we saw a lot of the ball, because they were down our end most of the time. But then at the start of the second half, again, they just bombarded us and got themselves totally back into the game, totally back into the tie. And we got to the point where I think we all felt this is slipping away from us. And then the dancing feet in the penalty area, which I shall never, ever, ever, ever forget, because every one of us just put the ball in the net, just put it in. And it took an absolute age for that goal to finally come. And I think we almost all passed out with just put it in the net.
It was Maskell, wasn't it? Was it Craig Maskell?
Craig Maskell,
yeah.
Little dancing feet in the area. He must have went around the same player about 20 times.
Yes, he did, yeah.
The goal is there, Craig. It's 10 yards away from you. Just roll it in the corner.
Yeah.
Almost had a conversation with him because it took so long before he finally put it in.
It's kind of right in front of me, and I was thinking, everybody was thinking the same thing, weren't they? And a great night to come home with. But then 1 or 2 more memories before we go any further, because we're going to get onto another bonkers game in a minute. Hoddle, this is from Jamie. Hi, Jamie. Simply the best player to wear a Swindon shirt. Still remember that day at Birmingham, losing at half-time. Single greatest second-half performance. 6-4 win at Birmingham, the Hoddle Wembley season. Now, I'm going to make a confession here. I was working in Devon at the time, and I missed that Birmingham game. And I shall never, ever forgive myself for that. That's all I can say. Right, let's go to Wembley then. Leicester City. Whatever happened to them? Leicester City then. I was lucky enough to be on the pitch that day, not literally playing, clearly, but right behind it when Glenn Hoddle stroked the ball into the net for the first one. We took a 3-0 lead, Ray. And then what happened?
Yeah. It was great getting to that 3-0 lead, wasn't it? And then much as we scored loads of goals in that period, we could let them in as well, despite having some really, great players like Coldwood and Sean Taylor and that around us. It's just those nerves kicking again, wasn't it? Once the first went in, the Leicester crowd were lifted. They were out, to be honest. And as the commentary said, surely when Taylor scored, surely this means the Premier League for Swindon Town now. That was almost like the curse of the commentator. But once they got the one, the other goals followed so quickly. I remember, being a bit stunned, and of course the atmosphere in the two ends changed totally. And I remember how shocking it was for a few moments. But what I would say is the town did really well to come back just after that. They suddenly gained some sort of momentum in the game themselves again, had a chance or two, and that kind of allowed them to get on the front foot for the penalty to come. So I kind of think they lost the plot for a short time, but managed to haul themselves back into the game, really well actually. And there's a lot of character to do that, because it looked lost at that point at 3-3.
It did. I mean, I remember I was by that goal when the 3 goals were going in, and you think, what on earth is happening? There were 1 or 2 decent players. The big centre half, if I remember right, Steve. Oh gosh, what's his name?
Walsh.
Steve Walsh, yes, of course.
Julian Joachim up front.
Julian Joachim, yeah. They were ripping Swindon to bits at that point. And, Swindon were down on their feet. And then, Rob, Mr. David Ellery, who will forever be remembered in Swindon Town folklore for one decision that he gave, Chalky, who to this day insists it's a penalty.
Possibly David Ellery, one of the worst referees the footballers have ever produced, became one of the best referees I've ever seen in my life, I have to say. It was, Ray mentioned it a few minutes ago. The contrast on that day probably is the biggest contrast in events we've ever experienced. You can think back to that Sheffield United one we'll talk about in a bit, I'm sure, but this tie was over. An hour into the game, the tie was over. Swindon were 3 up, absolutely cruising. Leicester were totally out of the game. This was such a party. And literally within 10 minutes, it felt like the world had come out of the bottoms of our backsides. It was horrendous.
Yeah, it was.
But I really don't know what happened to Leicester, and I still don't understand it now, because they were just on the crest of a wave, and you just thought, if you're a Leicester fan at this minute in time, just keep going at them, because you're going to get 6 or 7 at this minute in time. But it almost was. They got to 3-3, and they sat back. They stopped, and they sat back, and they just gave us the chance, as Ray mentioned a few minutes ago, just to get our foothold back in the game again. And that was all we needed, because suddenly from that point onwards, we were okay again. It was almost as if we'd lost the game, but just managed to find a way to save it somehow. And then, as you say, Chalky White goes through. In the ground, it's the most blatant penalty you've ever seen in your life, isn't it? There's no question about it. It's the most blatant penalty. Of course it's a penalty. Whether it's quite so blatant when you see it back on a replay, maybe not so much. But we'll always give him the credit for that.
And we'll give Paul Bowden, who we wish well, of course, with his current illness problems. We wish him well, who stepped up and took the penalty, which put Swindon into the Premier League. Ray, an extraordinary moment when you think about, what had happened in 1990. 3 years later, that ghost had been laid, hadn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think everybody felt that as well. I think that the thing about that 4-3 game is it was really the righting of a wrong in a lot of our minds, I think. And to come in such a style, in such a great game, it just made for a special day, really. And and there was a great feeling around the place. Once Paul Bowden scored that, you couldn't see us long to go from memory either. So and it turned into an absolutely brilliant sort of celebration afterwards. I remember coming back to Swindon, how great that was that night as well. It was just fantastic times.
Yeah, it was. Simon says, I said when we got a corner versus Leicester, Sean Taylor header. There was a photo in the advertiser shop side of Taylor diving header with me, stood up, arms aloft, gutted I didn't get the photo. We booked into a B&B opposite Prenton Park, saw the club coach leave the ground at about 11 o'clock with Dave Mitchell's head poking out of the skylight. Hoddle's goal at Wembley, he stroked it in. He certainly did. Miss Birmingham away too, says Craig. I was in a home in Sheffield painting the bathroom. I don't know what to say to that, really. And Kevin says, I turned my back on the penalty winner. I think we all remember Chalky standing at the skylight on the way home from Wembley, don't we? Doing that, but we'll leave it there, shall we? So Glenn Hoddle then departs to Chelsea, of course. Much speculation as to whether that move had already been agreed or not. But anyway, he left. And then Swindon, well, 93. That's it, really, as far as Wembley's concerned, isn't it? I mean, fabulous. The old Wembley, 3 wins, 3 games, 3 wins. We love it, the old Wembley. It was a dump, but it was our dump, as it were. Let's go forward to 2003, 2004 then. Finished 5th in Division 2, which is Division 3. Playoff semi-final against Brighton, who win the game at the County Ground 1-0. Parkin and Fallon put the town 2 up at Brighton, but I don't even know if I want to say this name. Adam Virgo scores a header deep into extra time and forces that penalty shootout at the rainy Withdean. Your memories, Ray?
Yeah, the rainy Withdean bit, I was in the Legends watching on a big screen. I didn't make it to that one away, but the actual first leg, again, I thought we were pretty solid. It was another Steve Coppell was there again, wasn't he? So having done it with Palace, I think it was Coppell with Brighton then, wasn't it? And that was, I think their side had a typical sort of organised Coppell sort of display, typical away day sort of display. But I thought we were the better side on the first leg anyway. But we managed to take a deficit to the Withdean, and then it looked like at the Withdean we had turned it around. And that was until very late. That was certainly looking that way.
Adam Virgo, I can see it now, Rob. I mean, we were all soaking wet, weren't we? And you just knew, didn't you, that was
did. It wasn't so much the fact it was who scored for them. It was the fact that I don't think any of us travelled down there that day with the greatest optimism. Ray's right. We played all right in that first leg. We were probably the better side. Certainly shouldn't have gone down to the second leg with a disadvantage. Probably should have gone there with an advantage. But it was almost as if Brighton didn't quite know what to do with a 1-goal lead. And we played really, really well in that 92 minutes or so that got us to a 2-goal advantage. Mooney and Parkin up front looked excellent once again, as always. And I'll never forget that goal from Adam Virgo, because Swindon had the chance of sticking the ball in the corner with Mooney was about 10 yards inside the Brighton half, minute of stoppage time to go. Just go to the corner, so stick it in the corner, do anything, just don't lose the ball. And he lost the ball. And of course, what then subsequently happened, they hoofed it long, got a long throw in, and you just sort of sensed what was coming. It had been such a cold night and such a wet night. It probably wasn't as cold as it felt. It was May, but it was freezing. We were freezing because we got absolutely soaked on an open bank for about an hour before the game started. So we were all freezing cold. The last thing we wanted was extra time. The last thing we wanted was penalties. Sure enough, what does Adam Virgo do? Thanks very much, mate. Cheers.
I always remember I went to the European Championships in Portugal that year, and the first person I saw when I walked into Porto Harbour was a bloke with a Brighton shirt on.
Yeah.
It didn't really do me a lot of good, that. Never been so wet as waiting to go to Brighton's second leg. Got off coach with no coat, heavens opened. Jamie, you would have got wet anyway if you've got a coat on, quite honestly. 2003, the season Fallon got the overhead kick versus Bristol City at the County Ground. Nobody will ever forget that. Who was there? That was one of the greatest goals ever seen at the County Ground. And if you've never seen it, just go on YouTube and have a look, because it is magnificent.
And so, the 3-goal comeback at Port Vale in the last 10 minutes. Yes,
absolutely. When we all said, it's all over, 3-0. Yeah, thanks for that. 2009, 2010 then. We've done that. We should remember, of course, that Brighton season, it wouldn't have been at Wembley. It would have been at Cardiff, wouldn't it? That would have
been our only chance to play at Cardiff, and it would have been Bristol City.
It would have been against Danny Wilson's Bristol City. So we move on to 2009, 2010. We play in the semi-finals, a tremendous couple of semi-finals against Charlton, and then the Wembley Bobble, Ray. And then those playoffs, semi-finals against Charlton, they were pretty dramatic things, weren't they?
Yeah, they were both two really good games, actually. And the first one, I think, we were 2 up again in the first leg, weren't we? And playing really well. And I thought Charlton were a bit fortunate to get the goal at the County Ground, but it really set up for a difficult second leg. And but the first leg again, very really good atmosphere. It was a night they put those sort of clappers out on the seats, if you remember. So it was kind of a different kind of atmosphere. It's still really noisy, but I thought we played really well. I went to both. I went to the away game as well, and that was an incredible night. I think somebody said on the comments coming, just what a fantastic sort of. Yeah. It had everything. It really did that night, and such a great relief to get through that game and get to Wembley. It was a real shame it was Millwall, I've got to say.
Yeah, it was horrible. I remember doing the commentary on that home leg with the most awful raging toothache as well, which didn't really help. The Metropolitan line went crazy on the line to Upperminster and the flags on the M14, M4. That goes back to the one against Leicester. I mean, I think, Rob, Stephen Darby, of course, he was only with us for 3 months, but he will be ever linked with Swindon Town for that one moment, won't he?
Place in folklore, no doubt. It's all about it. I mean, it's again, we had so much adversity on that night in southeast London. I mean, you lose your goalkeeper early, you have a sending off, you concede an own goal. You look at all the possibilities that Town had to try and find themselves a way back in the game. They were 2-0 down. Remember, they were going out of that tie with 10 men and without your first choice goalkeeper. So to have found a way back in through what was a fortunate goal, but nobody really cares too much about that. The fact that we found ourselves back at 2-1, Charlton still had best part of 45 minutes with the extra time as well to find a winner. And I still don't know to this day how they never found a winner. No. Because that extra time, it felt like it was 30 minutes, but it felt like it was about 3 days just to get to penalties. And you looked at our penalty lineup, and everyone who took one, you thought, he's not going to score. He's not going to score. Of course, he's not going to score. We had Kevin Amankwa step up for the fourth one. I don't think he had a shot at goal in his Town career except that one.
Yeah.
And he's put that one away. And like you say, it got to Stephen Darby with the last kick. And it was more a case of disbelief, I think, when that one went in. I don't think any of us thought we were actually ever going to get through that tie that night. And the fact that we did, and the fact that obviously what's happened since has made the Stephen Darby folklore will be forever with Swindon Town. And God bless him. Let's hope he's okay. And obviously we all know about his situation at the moment. But it's a night that never ever will be forgotten by anyone that was there. And I'm still struggling for breath from
something went wrong. Please.
Oh, I don't know what that was, but never mind. Some strange intervention. But anyway, and don't forget, if you want to get one of our Derby Rimmer badges, they're available on the Supporters Club website and indeed in the Legends Lounge as well before the game. And all the money goes to the Derby Rimmer Foundation. There's £1 if you get them on the website, postage and packing. But apart from that, all the money goes to that Derby Rimmer Foundation as our charity of the season. Charlton at home, Vincent Pericard hit the post with an open goal from about 2 yards. Yes, I think it would have been 3-0, and that probably would have settled it, wouldn't it?
He almost went straight down the other end and got their goal as well. That was the worst part about it. It was almost a 2-goal swing in 1 minute.
Yeah. All right, we won't talk much about the final because we haven't got too long left, actually. But the bobble. I mean, Charlie, I'm sure it brings about a cold sweat to this day. If there's one player you would have said, right, you can have my house, you can have my car, everything on Charlie Austin-Ray to score that goal. The bobble.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder if it really annoys Charlie as well, because that's such a career, but that bobble comes up so often. But it was typical of a miserable day. I think, that bobble was one of our few highlights as well. We didn't really look like scoring, if I'm honest, and they were just like workmanlike and horrible sort of Kenny Jackett side, I guess. And it was a horrible day. The bobble does stick in the mind, but I remember going out and leaving, and some of the sort of opposition supporters on that day when we were leaving the ground, I was really glad we didn't win, to be honest. They were horrible, even despite them beating us. So the whole day it was soured a little bit. The way that was soured it a little bit for me. So I kind of that kind of, it's not something I look back on fondly, I've got to say. As you said earlier, I loved the previous old Wembley appearances, but that one doesn't sit well with me really.
Yeah, 1-0 defeat in that one, a 2-0 defeat by Chesterfield, and worse to come, of course, in a later playoff. When, I mean, it's not much else to say, really, is there, Rob? Apart from that, I mean, it was the bobble what done it, really. I mean, what else is to say? Should we move on? It was horrible.
I was just going to say, Vic, the one thing that will always stick in my mind, apart from the things that we've already talked about for that game, is that that was the first time that my two boys went to Wembley, and I'd given them so many happy memories about trips to Wembley in the past and what might happen if things go well. You don't know how desperate that was on the way back. They were absolutely beside themselves.
Yeah, it was an awful game. 2012-2013, not much to say, really. We'd lost Paolo Di Canio, of course. Kevin McDonald had taken over. We got to the playoff semi-finals against Brentford. Drew 1-1 at home, 3-3 away. The only thing and then lost on penalties, the dreaded penalty shootout. The only best moment of that, of course, was Aidan Flint's header right at the death, which saved the town. I think we'll move on from that slowly because we are running out of time, and we've still got 2 more campaigns to go. So we're nearly there, but I mean, it doesn't get any better. That's all I can say. Spoiler alert, it doesn't get any better. Anthony says there's a video on BBC Sport with Stephen Darby talking with Marcus Stewart, ex-Bristol Rovers, who has MND. Very sad. Yeah, I watched that the other day. Haven't caught up with it yet. Then you should. I think he's genuinely loved, isn't he, Stephen Darby, by Swindon fans for that very reason. And he was a decent player. Let's not forget that. 2014-15 then, Sheffield United. Now, I wasn't there for the away game because it was general election night, and sadly I had to work. Darn general election. Ray, were you at Sheffield United for the first day?
I was watching on TV that one. I didn't get there, but it was a great. That was a really unexpected win, to be honest. That was a great night, and I think it was Nathan Byrne got a fairly late winner on that night, didn't he? And I was just trying to think who got our goal. He had a Swindon connection. He went on to be a manager. I can't think of his name. Our first goal.
Rob,
can you remember?
Centre back was gone out of my head too. Centre back came somewhere. Oh God,
yeah, but yeah, it was a great night, and it as I say, unexpected, and it kind of set up what was a bonkers night.
Yeah. Anybody who knows the answer to that, just send it in and we'll put it out. But let's go to the next one. Let's go 17 minutes into the second leg at the County Ground, shall we? Swindon Town 3, Sheffield United 0. Sam Ricketts. That's the answer to the question.
Ricketts.
There you go.
Yeah, there we go. Thanks,
That's
Chris.
what I was coming on to tell you. Okay.
Sam Ricketts it is. 3-0 to the Town after 17 minutes, and we're thinking, well, this is easy, this. Boy, oh boy. What a game that was, Rob. I mean, to this day, I don't think I've ever seen a better game of football in terms of it was just bonkers, wasn't it?
No, you lost count at one stage, didn't you? You couldn't believe what was going on. It was just a bizarre game, and I mean, it was one of the best games of football I think most people will say they've ever seen. They'll never see another game like that. And whenever it felt like Town got themselves, I think 3 times we got ourselves into a position where you thought the game was totally done. Now Sheffield United have got no chance of coming back. And all credit to them, because most teams just would have folded when you're so far behind at the County Ground. And Town were playing such a great brand of football again at that point in time. The goals from Gladwin and Nathan Burns, balls into the box, and you just look at it and you think they're just going to score at will here now. And Abika's goal second half, Michael Smith as well, and you just look at that team then, and you thought they'll just carry on scoring goals for fun here. But there was always a soft centre. What is it with Swindon? There's always a soft centre, isn't there? There always is. There's always a chance of a comeback, it feels like. Whatever season you look at, there's always a chance of a comeback. I don't think any of us thought it would happen. And when you're back to 5-5 and their board goes up and it says 9 minutes or 3 years. Again, we talked about the half hour at Charlton being the longest half hour of your life. Those 9 minutes aged me about 9 years, I think.
I just remember the picture of Nigel Clough going. I think we all felt like that, Ray. That was crazy, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and it was. And we probably didn't think we were going to see a 5-5 again, did we? Fast forward, yeah. But and I remember Ben Gladwin that night was sort of mercurial, wasn't he? He was excellent that night. Showed what a good player he really was.
Yeah, and we won't say much about the final, apart from Nathan Thompson in the opening minute, which I thought was very clever management actually by Simon Gregson. Put the ball over the top, make him run, bing. Hamstring. Thanks very much. End of the game, effectively. Although we did have a really good chance. Michael Smith had it at the start of the second half, I seem to remember. But yeah, New Wembley, 1-0, 2-0, 4-0. We need to turn that around. So shall we move then to the final playoff campaign, which is in the not too distant past, 2021-2022, the season when Swindon sort of rise again. Nobody thought Swindon would get anywhere near. We were all happy if they stayed above the dotted line, Ray, but a tremendous season, and then Port Vale in the semis.
Yeah, and again, I mean, what's the common theme for all these playoffs is how fine the margins are. Little events that just changed it one way or the other. And if you think again, we were pretty good in the first leg, and we let them score late, didn't we? And had they not got that one, no doubt we'd have gone through. But again, it made for a nervy second leg, and we should have buried them the first leg, I believe, and unfortunately we didn't. We allowed them in, and that set up the second leg.
Josh Davison, of course, Rob, had a great chance, didn't he, to have made it 3-0, and that really would have settled it, wouldn't it?
I think so. I think there were so many times you look back on that, both of those two games, to be honest, and you think the game should have turned in our favour. That Josh Davidson moment was one. Their goal was a bit fluky at the county ground. It wasn't a classic by any stretch. Just sort of crept in the far corner after a couple of defensive rickets, could have got it clear. And then in the second leg, of course, although they bombarded us for 25 minutes, one of the most blatant handballs you're ever going to see in the first 5 minutes would have given us a penalty. Of course, all of our fans are at the opposite end of the pitch, so there's no great pressure on the referee because we couldn't quite see it. But everyone watching on television could see that it was almost basketball in the penalty area, wasn't it? And you think then that was whilst the game was still at 0-0 at Port Vale. They hadn't scored at that stage. Suddenly the tide would change completely if Town get a 2-goal lead again. But wasn't to be. Conceded the goal. Never really looked like ourselves at Port Vale that night. I didn't think at any stage did we look like the team that had played for most of the season. And we managed to sort of edge our way to penalties, really. We never looked like we were convincing. And then, of course, in the shootout itself, you get 2 chances to win it, 3 chances to win it if you count their goal, their shots as well. And it's that's the bit that really sticks in the throat, isn't it? I think it's the fact that you had kicks to get yourself to Wembley again, and you never took them.
And again, Harry McCurdy was one of them, wasn't he? And you know, McCurdy in that first leg was ripping them to bits, wasn't he? I mean, that was McCurdy at his very best in that first leg. 2 goals and really unplayable. Let's have a look. Glenn says, I had the great pleasure of presenting Stephen Darby with the Man of the Match award at one of his games for us. A smashing chap, very humble. The 5-5 was bizarre and amazing at the same time. We now hold the record of goals in a playoff game, 13. Gladwin was unplayable that day. Hello, Rob. That team, from being favourites to go down, should have got automatic. Don't mention the pens. Sadly, we have to. Wrong team picked for the final. I'm not sure. I think that goes back to the Preston game when maybe referring to Nathan Thompson, who clearly wasn't fit. So, yeah, we all remember that Port Vale game for the events afterwards as well, which was pretty horrible. Many of us remember being almost hit by lots of objects flying in our direction and a miserable journey home afterwards when, again, so near, so far. So, Ray, you're putting this project together, a 33% success rate in the playoffs. Is that good or bad, would you say?
Yeah, well, it's probably about average for the number of games almost. To be honest, we should have done this program the other way around and it would have seemed like a really good story.
Now you say that.
Yeah. But no, I think having lived through it, we maybe our form in it hasn't been great, but we were like playoff royalty in the early days.
Yeah.
Just we need to get back to that somehow.
Yeah, Rob, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, the one thing about the playoffs, whether you love them or hate them, you can't ignore the drama that they bring, can you?
Oh, that sums it up perfectly, Vic, I think. I mean, we talked tonight at great length and with great relish and memory of the fun nights and the really horrible nights that we had. But every single one of them, as you said, was an event in itself. Whether it was a two-legged tie, whether it was a final, whatever it was an event in itself. There were almost 5 minutes in each of those games that were events in themselves. And they're so desperate. You're so desperate to win those games because you know what the rewards are at the end of them. But they are just excruciating to be part of. As a fan, I think it's taken years off my life for playoffs, I have to say. That's the only way I can describe them, because you're so in the moment. You so want your team to win those games that when it doesn't go your way, it's soul destroying. When it does go your way, it's the most wonderful experience ever. And I feel for all those younger Swindon fans. They just never experienced that.
Yeah. I mean, we'll all remember that day against Preston, which was, it was over after 2 minutes, Ray, wasn't it? I mean, it's the sort of day you go to Wembley and the game's done after 2 minutes.
Yeah, it was so frustrating. The Nathan Thompson bit was so frustrating, wasn't it? Because he was so key to us as well. We were all really hoping he'd make it. And once he went down, that kind of... And they were strong, weren't they? There was a Beckford up front. They were physically quite strong as well. And it was done and dusted early, yeah.
And the big question, great reminiscing, but will we get to the playoffs this season? And also, heartbreak after the Sunderland final will never, ever leave me. Well, Rob's shaking his head already. What about you, Ray?
Well, to be honest, Vic, when I started doing the project and was doing the early stages of it, and so I'm sort of working on the first 2 campaigns at the moment, there was part of me that thought, oh, God, I hope we can do this quick enough, because if we had another one at the end of this year, I'll have to do that as well. But I've lost that worry, to be fair.
Well, we never know. It all kicks off. The rest of the season kicks off against Bradford City, 16th against 17th on Saturday. So you never know, do you? You just never know.
I'll just say, Vic, if it is a playoff season, this is going to be one incredible roller coaster for the next 4 months.
You're right. Well, thank you ever so much. It's been lovely reminiscing in part. It's been really painful in others, but I hope it's been cathartic to many people who watched tonight. Because it's what it drives us, Chris, doesn't it? This is what drives us, getting to these positions where you have these games, you look forward to these games. This is what drives us as football fans.
It certainly does. Yeah, this is what it's all about. It's all the roller coaster. Sorry. Well, I hope everybody's enjoyed this. Thank you, Ray and Rob, for joining Vic on All Our Memories Come Back. One thing we will say, Vic and I have been talking, and as we're at the start of 2004, we're just wondering if we need to have a bit of a fresh face on the Monday night panel and the On the Sofa. And tonight just shows that other things can be used in these situations. So with the ex-players that we used to do on a Monday night, it is harder to get them now. COVID, it was a lot easier. So I am having a bit of difficulty trying to engage with the players to actually come on. So if you do know any ex-players that you think would be willing to join us for an hour on a Monday, please let us know. Anybody you'd like me to try and get hold of, it might be somebody that I've missed. So please let us know. Or if you have any ideas of how we can freshen this up, like tonight, is there a special one-off that we can do? Or on the Monday night panel, is there people that you think or you're willing to join us on the Monday night panel, or people that you think would be interested? Please let us know. We can use our admin email address, admin@stfc-osc.com, or Facebook, Twitter messages. Please just let us know and we can see what we can do, because we want to keep everybody engaged, and there might be something that we're missing. So please let us know. Anything you want to add on that, Vic?
No, absolutely right. I mean, it's lovely to do this one-off kind of thing. And, I've been very heavily involved in 1969 for the last few months. So things like that, any great memories that you have. I saw one suggestion as best goalkeepers we've ever had. So, things like that would be lovely. We'd love to sort of, maybe we get one or two of these people that you think were the best goalkeepers on to talk about being the best goalkeepers, things like that,
Yeah, and they can debate it between themselves.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah.
Just don't ask them to catch.
Yeah. Who's got...
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks ever so much, everybody. Again, thank you, Ray, and thank you, Rob, for joining
Pleasure.
Vic tonight. It's been wonderful just listening and everybody's memories. It's certainly brought them back for me. So thank you very much. We will be back next week with the review of the Bradford game on Saturday. So please join us then. If not, we hope you have a good week, and we'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.